My name is Corbett, and I'm dually diagnosed, which means I have a mental illness and I am an addict in recovery. I'm the founder of a program called Dual Diagnosis Anonymous and executive director of Dual Diagnosis Anonymous of Oregon. There's one of the things that we've tried to do in DDA, it's also known as DDA, is to keep things simple. Kind of like what you were telling me about Dr. Bob and his talk with Bill Wilson, keep it simple, and it's about love. Dual Diagnosis Anonymous is similar to traditional 12-step programs, although our meeting format is pretty similar. We have a chairperson, we have a secretary that keeps track of the 7th tradition, which is the donations that our memberships provide to keep a chapter going. So it's pretty traditional. We have readings, we have the rules of respect, which we always read first. So for example, if this were a meeting, I would say, hi, my name is Corbett and I'm dually diagnosed. I will be your chairperson for this meeting. We always read the rules first because first and most importantly, who you see here and what is said here, let it stay here. And in our program, we've added the word confidentiality to the anonymity. Anonymity means that if I want to remain anonymous, then that's going to be respected in a DDA meeting. But also the idea of confidentiality, it represents the need for trust, which is a cornerstone of our fellowship, and that really relates to confidentiality. In DDA, people are going to be talking about experiences and symptoms and counseling and issues that they don't want going out of the meeting, and there's a good reason for that. If, for example, I'm in a DDA meeting, I may talk about self-harm, I may talk about symptoms that I'm having. If someone were to take that information out of the meeting to a professional clinical person, I may or may not experience repercussions from that. It may be determined that I need extra help. It may be interpreted that I might be a risk to danger myself. And we deal with things in DDA that need to stay in DDA. And in our 12th tradition, we recognize that confidentiality is as important as anonymity, at least in the meeting. We also recognize, by the way, that for those of us that want to step out and say, yes, my name is Corbett Monica and I have a mental illness, there's power in that. So after the rules are read, we ask for people to introduce themselves, newcomers and guests. Is anyone here? We don't ask for people that are newcomers in the sense that they have 30 days or less clean and sober. People with dual diagnosis are extra sensitive, and we're sensitive to that. There are people that may have a psychotic disorder. We don't want to embarrass people that have a mental illness and recognize them as being clean and sober less than 30 days. So we ask for, is anyone here for the first time, or are there any guests to introduce themselves? And after the introductions, we start with our preamble, which is every 12-step fellowship has a preamble. Most 12-step fellowships focus on strength and hope in recovery and experience. DDA, our preamble recognizes that we share experiences, strengths, weaknesses, feelings, fears, and hopes with one another to resolve our dual diagnosis and or learn to live at peace with unresolved problems. And there's a whole spectrum of emotions that go along with dual diagnosis. So we tried to identify the feelings and the fears and the things that people are dealing with and let them know that this is a safe place to talk about that. Next, we read our opening thought, which really contains, what I did was I took the principles of the Serenity Prayer. The opening thought was actually written so that people can facilitate. There's a process called 12-step facilitation in which a clinical professional, it's called TSF, or 12-step facilitation, where a clinical provider can facilitate a group using principles of the 12-step programs. Well, some clinicians work in state institutions, maybe Oregon State Hospital or counseling agencies, and of course they can't use the G word, God, and they can't use prayers because of the relationship to their agency, something like that. So I wrote the opening thought, which uses the principles of the Serenity Prayer, but there's no God in the opening thought. You can use the same words of God. I mean the same letters. You can go ODG, you can go DOG, you can go GDO, but you can't go GOD. Dog forbid. So, so, so here's the trip is, the opening thought, some DDAers, which is how we refer to one another in our fellowship, in one of the residential program in Eastern Oregon, were in a group that was facilitated, and they were reading the opening thought. And they said, we want this in our DDA meeting. So I brought it to the group consciousness of DDA. We have a monthly fellowship gathering. So for 3 months, I went around to the fellowship of DDA and posed a question, would you like an opening thought or an opening prayer? And as it turns out, people said, well, you know, we always end with a serenity prayer, and, you know, we got the God word already in there, so let's do the dog word and do the opening thought. So now we have an opening thought. I do have a literature committee, by the way, and they've been very supportive of the things that we've incorporated. And what a blessing for me, and how humbling to be able to put together the packet for DDA. After we read the opening thought, we have the 12 steps, which are exactly as they were published in 1939, at least from step 2 through step 11. And in April of 1996, I think it was, or May, I wrote a letter to AA's central office and got permission to use the 12 steps. I kept the letter that they sent me, giving me permission for my program, DDA, with the disclaimer that this doesn't mean that AA sponsors this program or is supporting this program. And there's a certain comfort in the recovery community. People know the 12 steps of AA. I didn't want to modify them at all. So steps number 2 through 11 are exactly as they were published. There was a change in step 1. Instead of saying we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, it says our dual diagnosis. And in step 12, AA step 12, it talks about carrying the message to alcoholics. Ours is carry the message to those who still suffer from the effects of dual diagnosis. And which brings me back to our symbol. This is the fellowship of DDA, and in 1992, AA gave this symbol to the world. So we are using this, which is the core of our fellowship, but it's the space in the arms that is the extended family of DDA. It is also the extended family that suffers from the effects of dual diagnosis. And I realized early on that it isn't just a person with dual diagnosis that suffers. So it was clear when I got the 12 steps that we were going to include folks around us to spread our word of hope and healing to folks around us. And then we have the 5 steps, which I wrote the 5 steps for the first time in March of 1996. I worked on them from March of 1996 to March of 2008. That was probably a function of my obsessive compulsive disorder. My board of directors probably decided that I should probably protect these so that people couldn't say they were DDA. And so I wrote them and finalized them in March of 98. They're all in the past tense. And after the 5 steps are read, we do have traditions, but our feeling has been in DDA that we want to spend more time interacting and talking, but we make the traditions available to people that want to see them. Every once in a while we read them in the meetings, but after the 5 steps are read, the chairperson may choose a topic and share about, for example, why is it important to live one day at a time? Why is higher power important in our program? Any concept relating to the 12 steps of recovery may be the topic, or it may be about medication. As a matter of fact, it may be resistance to medication. Why do I have to take medication? I don't want to just be, this is part of the experience of DDAers. There is a perception that, okay, I want to get clean, so why would I let a psychiatrist give me drugs when I don't want to take drugs? So we make a definite distinction between prescribed medication and prescribing drugs for ourselves. We're not doctors. There's a huge difference. And so medication management, if we want to refer to it like that, is really important. And so another thing that happens is a person may want to get feedback from the group, from people who have taken the medication that they're taking. We have DDAers that are really good at knowing what medications other DDAers should take. For example, you should take Depakote because I've taken Depakote and it works really well. And that kind of information is important because we believe that the DDAers should participate in their recovery with their prescriber. So the more that they know, the more they can participate in their own recovery. So most of our meetings are open meetings, which means that the chairperson will simply decide that this is an open meeting and I want to tell you about my day or my week and just share. The other thing about DDA is if it is a topical meeting where the chairperson picks a topic to talk about, when the chairperson shares their experience, strength, weaknesses, hope, feelings, fears, or hopes, whatever that is, for 5, 10, 15 minutes, they open the meeting up and they say, this meeting is now open for participation. Feel free to discuss the topic or any other issue related to dual diagnosis. And we read that, he or she reads that when they open the meeting up for anybody. So it's rare that people stay on topic if there is a topical meeting. People want to talk about medication or symptoms, and that's cool in DDA. And with about 5 to 10 minutes remaining, the chairperson will say, I'm sorry, our time is almost up. Are there any burning desires? And that's a traditional, I may hear something in a meeting that it happened in the meeting today where I've got to say something, someone triggers a thought that I think I've got to say something about that. So we allow for burning desires. After that, the chairperson turns the meeting over to our chapter secretary. DDA is a little different than traditional 12-step programs. We do not elect chairpersons that stay in position for any length of time. We rotate the chairpersonship among the meeting at every meeting, and we feel it's important that people have an opportunity to chair a meeting. It's a great way of service, and we help people, we encourage people. I will sit next to people that don't feel that they can chair a meeting and simplify it for them. But we do have chapter secretaries that serve a term. It could be for 3 months and sometimes well over a year. And their role is to identify someone to chair the meeting and keep track of the numbers. We don't care about people's names, but we do keep track of the numbers of people in our meeting. And if they do the 7 tradition, we have a document here where they can keep track of the funds so that each chapter of DDA can be self-supporting. And after the secretary also reports on announcements, and they pass the basket around if they're doing the 7th tradition, which is collecting donations from the membership. And when that's done, our last reading is called Just for Today in DDA, and it has become our most popular reading. It is also the pamphlet that we pass out to people. Just for Today has 12 stanzas, and I'm going to read what it says on the front of our pamphlet. Just for Today contains many of the principles of 12-step recovery programs and has become a cornerstone of DDA. Just for Today not only reminds us to keep our focus on today, it also shows us how. Just for Today is read at the end of every DDA meeting. So after we read Just for Today in DDA, we form a circle and we say the Serenity Prayer together. It's the only prayer we use in DDA. We have nothing against Christianity or any other religion or the Quran or the Bible. We say the Serenity Prayer because it's known as the 12-step recovery prayer. We don't use other scripturally based prayers in DDA. And I suppose as a founder, it might be, and from the feedback I've got, it seems to open the meeting up to other faiths and other people that may be agnostic and don't necessarily want to align themselves with some scriptural reference, but who knows. And at the end of the Serenity Prayer, the meeting is over, and we do usually at the end of our meetings, like most 12-step meetings, there's some collaboration and people talking and stuff like that. So it's not rocket science. If a person, we have had requests from other states, including Nebraska, Iowa, Texas, Colorado, and this is the meeting packet for every one of our chapters. We want to demystify dual diagnosis. All you have to do is care about people to start a chapter of DDA. And if I can get to the first meeting, and I have found I'm so overwhelmed and humbled by the success of DDA. I'm so glad I'm older now. I'll be 63 this year, and as long as I could keep Corbett, Lord knows I have a lot to learn, but as long as I could keep Corbett out of the way, I have found that people appreciate my presence in their first meeting, and I'm going to show up if I can and chair the first meeting of every new chapter. So every chapter that wants this will get this. It's pretty simple to do. We have a toll-free number at our central office, which I don't know what it is, but, oh, I can get it off of here. But that way, if people want to call the DDA central office for advice or my cell phone, we can do all this by the phone. So as dog is my witness, I guess, yeah, is there more?
That's it, we're done.
Wow.
Well done, man.